the government is one of those basic responsibilities of Congress.
I firmly believe that when all the facts are presented, not only will I be exonerated, but I still will be the New Jersey's senior senator.
I think it's going to take an unprecedented level of involvement to make sure that workers get what they deserve here.
He's the only president who stands up and just solidly says, I'm a labor man, I'm a union man.
With your help, we're going to win the South Carolina primary by a lot. We're up by about 50 points.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez now says he will not resign after getting indicted on federal bribery charges. The Justice Department says Menendez and his wife accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes from 3 New Jersey businessmen. The senator claimed the cash found by authorities in his home was from personal savings, but multiple Democratic lawmakers have called on him to resign.
I recognize this will be the biggest fight yet. But as I have stated throughout this whole process, I firmly believe that when all the facts are presented, not only will I be exonerated, but I still will be the New Jersey's senior senator.
News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us now. Nicole, thanks for being here. You have been covering this all day. The senator refuses calls to resign after this indictment. What's the latest?
Well, the latest is, as you say, the senator is prepared to go back to Washington potentially as soon as tomorrow when the Senate reconvenes. And, he plans to get back to work. Now, he did lose his committee chairmanship heading the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but he does intend to return to Washington. On top of that, of course, he still now has to deal with this legal battle beginning Wednesday, where he is due to appear in court here in the New York area. So he will have to juggle his schedule, obviously, between both the political and the legal. But really the message that the senator conveyed is that he believes that many, even suggesting the prosecutors who indicted him, may be rushing to judgment here, and that he should be presumed innocent until proven guilty.
Nicole, you have to wonder, as a political reporter, who is going to potentially challenge Senator Menendez as he moves toward running again for another 6-year term. I think about maybe Congressman Tom Kean, the son of the former governor. He's run for Senate before in New Jersey. Maybe Congressman Andy Kim, who's really been out there in the spotlight in recent days. You've spoken with him just this past day.
Yeah, that's right. We did speak with Congressman Andy Kim just a short time ago, who represents a district in southern New Jersey. And, he really got out in front of this over the weekend, announcing that he would officially challenge Senator Menendez. Some have suggested he's kind of taking advantage of a political opportunity here. But he said, no, look, this is something I feel compelled to do. We also talked to the congressman more specifically about his thoughts, particularly being a congressman of color, because Senator Menendez, in a statement last week, said he also feels that this indictment is an attempt to push a Latino like him out. And so we asked Congressman Kim his take on those remarks.
His instinct is always to just punch back. We've always seen that. He launches those types of accusations back. Look, very clear here. I'm a son of immigrants, married to an immigrant. I was the first Asian American ever elected to the United States Congress from the state of New Jersey. When I got into Congress, there were 0 Korean Americans in Congress. I totally understand what it means to think through the challenges that minorities face in politics and elsewhere. That is not at all what was on my mind or the minds of the governor or anyone else.
So the congressman really not buying Senator Menendez's explanation here as far as suggesting that perhaps his race may have had something to do with this indictment and with efforts to get him out of his seat. What Congressman Kim says is that he just doesn't think that he should be representing the state of New Jersey anymore, and that's why he is running and plans to challenge him next year.
Nicole Killian, on the ground in the Garden State. Thank you so much for your reporting. Meanwhile, lawmakers here have less than a week to pass legislation to avert a federal government shutdown. House Republican infighting, though, has stalled spending bills from making it across the finish line. So far, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is urging his colleagues to unify to keep the government open. But Here's the caveat. If he pushes a bill with Democratic support, he could face the prospect of his speakership being challenged by conservatives in his own party. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us here at the table. Scott, Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida and other conservatives continue to say McCarthy needs to do X to get a deal across. What is the X at this moment?
At this moment, he needs what they call in Las Vegas a three-team parlay. He's going to try 3 different gambits in a row and try to get them all to work to avert the shutdown and keep his job. The first one is to pass through the House this week, likely with Republican-only votes, 4 spending bills funding the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, Department of State, and some agriculture programs. If he does that, he thinks he can buy enough goodwill with Republicans to try the second gambit, which is to get a continuing resolution, a short-term, 1 month or month and a half pause button to extend negotiations, keep the government open in the meantime. If he can pull that off and keep his Republicans in line, he tries the third gambit, which is to get something through the House and Senate that the president will sign, which requires a bipartisan coalition. He's got to pull all those off, one of which he's got to do in short order.
And hovering over all of this is the shadow of former President Donald Trump, the Republican frontrunner. Let's hear what Speaker McCarthy had to say about Trump and the shutdown.
I think we're much stronger when we stay open. I don't understand how not paying the troops and not paying our border agents. Look what happened last night. A new day is another new record on the border. 11,000 people. Last week, I told you 10,000 were all shocked by. This is because of the border policies of Biden. And what we're trying to do is secure our border.
Scott, explain to us what McCarthy's referencing in terms of Trump's comments about the ongoing negotiations and what the dynamic is between the speaker and the former president.
Donald Trump has complicated an already tenuous negotiation, Bob. He has posted on his Truth Social account that Republicans should block any deal that doesn't defund an awful lot of things, including Jack Smith's prosecution of Donald Trump. That's not really on the table for a bipartisan negotiation, so that's just going to be a fly in the ointment. Kevin McCarthy is saying, I think unequivocally and consistently over the past few days, especially today, is that a shutdown is bad. It's bad for the House getting leverage in negotiations. It's bad politics. It's also just bad for members. It's bad for incumbents, no matter your party, because constituents are going to take it on the chin, not just the thousands of federal workers in every congressional district in America, but all the businesses that serve them, all the jarring effects it has on the economy. So McCarthy is saying it's just a bad thing. Some of the folks pushing for a shutdown, saying it's not bad considering what it can do to federal spending, haven't been through one yet. They weren't here in 2018, nor were they here in 2013.
And when you look ahead, let's say the House can't get its act together and come to a consensus. Could Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and Senate Majority Chuck Schumer ultimately come up with a Senate-created deal that they could present to the House to say, take it or leave it?
And I think that's likely this week. As this week progresses, the Senate comes up with something that they try to pass over to the House and try to induce some action to avert the shutdown and create a bipartisan compromise that is inevitable.
What would be the broad strokes of a Senate deal based on your reporting?
It would have some of those core things funded that they know the House wants to fund in short order. It's going to have Homeland Security funding in it. It's going to have vibrant Department of Defense funding in it. It's going to have a little more domestic spending than maybe the House wants. It's going to include those things you never want to say no to. Veterans benefits, Department of Defense. But they can try to induce a bipartisan compromise the House will have to come up with, but it doesn't mean it'll happen by Sunday. I think what it also does, Bob, maybe it speeds up talk of a discharge petition, a group that circumvents leadership in the House with both parties, tries to get something done, but that seems more like a shutdown ender versus a shutdown preventer.
Scott MacFarlane, thank you very much. Both President Biden and former President Trump are set to visit striking auto workers this week in Michigan. Michigan Democratic Congresswoman Haley Stevens joins us next to discuss. You're streaming America Decides.
Do you think injecting this high level of presidential politics complicates getting a settlement?
Well, I think right now we are in such a crisis in our economy, a crisis of inequality, that it is going to take a level of political and popular support unlike that we've seen.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was Democratic Congresswoman of New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, discussing the United Auto Workers strike and the potential impact presidential candidates might have on negotiation, as well as lawmakers. Both President Biden and former President Trump plan to be in Michigan this week. Biden will join workers on the picket line, and a day later, Trump will pass the second GOP debate out in California, instead to speak to current and former union members. Michigan Democratic Congresswoman Haley Stevens joins us now. Michigan seems to be the center of the political world this week. President Biden heading there tomorrow. We'll get to the auto workers strike in just a moment, but let's start with the looming shutdown on Capitol Hill. We just spoke to Scott McFarland, our correspondent. Where do you stand on where the negotiations stand?
Well, I'm eager to get something done. We need to keep the government open and running. We've had the appropriation season starting at the beginning of this year. The government runs out of funding on the 30th. If we don't have a deal, let's do the continuing resolution to keep the government running while we continue to negotiate. We certainly see Chuck Schumer over on the Senate side now getting in front of the House, believing that they're running out of time. They've cut their deal. We know that appropriations bills have been passing through on committee, but we've been stalled on the floor of the House. I don't want to get back to the legislative session this week and see us stall any further. And I certainly don't want to see a shutdown. That would be inexcusable.
What do you expect, Congresswoman, when President Biden comes to the picket line tomorrow? Is he going to just show solidarity, or do you believe he will in some way take a stand on the negotiations and really try to lean in on that front?
Well, look, it's not his negotiation to lead, but the president is coming in on the invitation from UAW President Shawn Fain, who's been doing a remarkable job communicating the demands of the UAW and obviously some of the inequities. And I'll say I was on the picket line in Pontiac, Michigan yesterday, talking with UAW members, and they are really excited that President Biden is coming into town. They were asking me about the visit. They were saying that it's really nice that a sitting U.S. president is coming to show solidarity. And Joe Biden is going to do what he does best, which is connect with people, listen to these workers. This is their moment, and this is their negotiation to lead. And the points are shining through about worker fairness, about a just transition, as we're leading the way here in Michigan with the new technologies seeding through the auto industry, frankly, technologies that were innovated on during a COVID-19 pandemic, just as we were responding to the industrial call to action with the supply chain disruption. So this does continue to be an exciting moment, and I think President Biden will meet the charge.
But when you step back, Congresswoman, do you see any political risk for President Biden appearing at a picket line? It's not a step a president often takes. He's decided to do so this time. You know Michigan politics as well as anyone. It's an important state for 2024. Is it all positive, you think, in terms of political gain for President Biden to have this kind of stand with labor, or could it cost him in other parts of Michigan? What's your read?
Well, I'll tell you this. If it was any other president besides Joe Biden, I would certainly understand what you mean about the risks. But nobody knows the auto industry like Joe Biden knows, and he has it in his bones. When we were campaigning in 2020, we had Joe Biden in the classic car. He loves this industry. And there's also certainly a respect for what's going on here, the outcome of this strike, the outcome of the negotiations. It's got to deal workers in. And I'll tell you this, as a lawmaker, I cared a whole heck of a lot about passing that Inflation Reduction Act, making sure that we were getting those EV tax credits. And now we know that this negotiation is recognizing what it's going to mean for workers. The Inflation Reduction Act and what we got done with electric vehicle tax credits and the like, certainly also for battery manufacturing production, is meeting a global charge. This is where the automakers have wanted to go. And the workers are now saying, we've got to have our fair share of this. We made sacrifices during the Great Recession. We made sacrifices during the auto rescue. We need to get rid of COLA. We need to get, it's not get rid of COLA. We need to achieve COLA. We need to get rid of the tiered wage system, but we need to achieve COLA. And certainly that's going to be an outcome of this negotiation, I believe, when it's said and done.
Former President Trump will be in your state, Michigan, on Wednesday to talk about some of these issues. Do you believe Trump would be welcome at the picket line outside the auto plants?
Well, I'll say this, he wasn't invited by the UAW. He got in front of the union, and the UAW president, Shawn Fain, has made it clear that he's not welcome. I find it quite peculiar that a former sitting president who should well know that not believing the polls is the way to be leading his campaign. And he's afraid to go and debate his opponents, some who worked in his very administration. And so he's playing politics. I have no idea what his presence is going to be like on the picket line. But I'll just say this, that the former president lost Michigan in a big way in 2020. He called into question the electoral results. People have paid the price for those conspiracies here in Michigan. And those politics just aren't welcome here. And frankly, his lies aren't welcome either. You have to remember, Donald Trump was the one who engaged in a Twitter war with the automakers, having no regard for the auto workers themselves.
Is Michigan in play in 2024?
I don't think we can take anything for granted. Michigan is absolutely a purple state. We're led by an incredible governor, Gretchen Whitmer. She had an overwhelming victory last November. She worked very hard to achieve that victory, and it was through honesty, integrity, and good governance. But Michigan is definitely still a swing state. I represent Oakland County, Michigan, and I'm already putting into place the markers to make sure that we get out the vote in November 2024.
Is this strike going to end anytime soon based on your conversations with union leaders, elected officials who are also involved? I mean, it must take a hit on the state at some point if these plants remained at least partly shuttered.
I'm listening to the auto workers, and that was a question I had on the picket line just yesterday. It was an almost 80-degree day here in Michigan. People were in shorts. They were carrying their signs. They were sharing their stories with me. And I was asking them, how are you doing? And people are energized for what is going to be the outcome of this strike and what this strike represents for the worker itself. You see Shawn Fain communicating on national TV, things that we haven't seen labor leaders be able to communicate in a long time. And so this is really a question, Robert, for the auto workers themselves. We have to listen to them right now. It is not up to me or any other lawmaker to be weighing in or putting pressure on, particularly at this time. We're 10 days into this strike. We're seeing some signs of progress, but I'm not ready to make a prediction on when this is going to come to an end.
Congresswoman Haley Stevens, we'll have to keep checking in with you. Appreciate you stopping by. Former President Donald Trump is touting recent 2024 polling. We'll dig into national polling at this early stage in the race. You're streaming America Decides.
In New Hampshire, we're way ahead. In South Carolina, we're way ahead. And nationally, we're up 57 points. Can you believe this?
That was former President Donald Trump today in Summerville, South Carolina, speaking to supporters at his campaign field office there. Well, Trump touted recent poll numbers today. CBS News polling has found Americans do have concerns about both the former president and President Biden serving another term. CBS News chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett joins us now. Major, when you step back, you've been covering politics for some years, and you think about this early stage, and there's a new poll from the Washington Post, ABC. CBS News has its own polling showing different gaps between Trump and Biden. What matters?
So there's a freak out right now in Democratic circles about this Washington Post ABC poll. 9-point lead for Trump. 9-point lead. The methodology can be criticized because there's an order of asking the questions. You ask the issue questions first. If you're dissatisfied with the issues, then you ask, well, how do you like Biden? Well, I don't like him at all. Oftentimes, you start with who do you like in the presidential first, then you get to the issues. So that might have distorted the outcome. But the bottom line, Robert, lots of Democrats I talked to today said two things. The poll is suspect, its methodology is bad, but bad news is bad news, and the White House ought to take at least some signal from the bad news that you can find in this poll, the NBC poll, and other polls. They have all the president at around mid-40s. That's not good for a re-election campaign. So what do you do about it? Well, you lean into Biden economics, you go to the picket line in Detroit, and you continue to press forward. There isn't a sense among Democrats I talked to today that this poll or any other poll is reason to press the panic button, but it is reason to keep that panic button in sight.
I just asked the Congresswoman from Michigan, Haley Stevens, about whether there's a political cost at all for the president going to the picket line in Michigan. How do you read it politically?
Probably not, in the sense that identifying with this particular set of workers and their grievances is different than it would have been for UPS workers or rail workers or port workers, in the sense that, and this is an important part of the strike conversation, they did give concessions in the Great Recession to keep the automakers afloat. Now that they're making profits, they'd like some of that back. That is not an unreasonable, super aggressive labor stance. Are the UAW requests now possibly too much? Yeah, they're high, 40% wage increase. But that's not where it's going to land, and the UAW leadership knows that. So I think in this area, the president is well positioned, if a little bit late. He's going in part because former President Trump announced he would get there first. The president's trying to beat him to the punch. So there's a little bit of that push and pull. But on this, I think the president is probably going to gain ever so slightly.
What about Senator Bob Menendez? Some are trying to nudge him out, tell him to resign. Is there anyone who could get Menendez to actually step down, or is he in that seat through the duration of his term?
He's made it clear that this is for his prospects in the Senate, no different than the first time he was
But is there
indicted.
any variable you see on the horizon?
So Sherrod Brown today of Ohio, colleague on the progressive side, said he needs to resign. That's not budged him yet. If there is a super big groundswell, that might alter his feelings, but Menendez has made it pretty clear. He wants to stay, intends to stay, and believes he will be vindicated in a court of law.
With the governor, Phil Murphy, coming out against him, could you see someone like Tom Kaine, the congressman, or someone with a big name in New Jersey Democratic politics saying this is ripe for a primary?
Well, ripe for a primary, certainly. That's different. That's a whole different conversation. Someone challenging him, but him stepping down and saying, I'm out, I don't see it.
You think Republicans will play in New Jersey in 2024?
Probably not. I mean, not on a serious level, not on a statewide level. They've got other places they've got to focus their energy and money.
And it seems easier to win a gubernatorial race in New Jersey versus a federal race.
Being a federal race,
level.
very, very hard. No sign of that in very, very long time. And the greater question for Republicans right now is what's going to happen at this debate. Will anyone call the former president out for suggesting over the weekend, as he did, that a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has committed treason and might need to be executed? Is anyone going to say anything about that?
But even if they do, could they break through? What breaks through at this debate? Is it a Milley comment or something else?
Saying he's not qualified to be president again. That will break through. Republicans in their radio ads and their TV ads are beginning to get a little more confrontational. They still don't want to drop his name. They don't want to name check him in an ad.
The hour's late.
Exactly. I know the hour's getting late. They have to make some very strong calculations about how aggressive they're going to be about trying to get the thing that he's currently in possession of, what? Front-runner status. You want to knock off the front-runner, you better challenge that front-runner directly. That's true in every primary contest. It is especially true in this one.
10 seconds.
Yeah.
Who are you watching Wednesday night at the second Republican debate?
Nikki Haley, more than anyone else. Can she make it even better than the first one? Of the candidates on that stage, no one has gained more in terms of chatter, a little bit of poll numbers, and a little bit of money.
All eyes on Nikki Haley, the former ambassador. Major Garrett, thank you. And that does it for today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.